Jordan has been surrounded and invaded by conquerors since it was established, and it's persisted through countless conflicts that should have wiped it off the map. Despite this, the country is one of the most stable in the Middle East, leaving us to wonder, how has Jordan flourished while its neighbors fall into war, ruin, and dysfunction? The first part of this answer lies in its physical location. Jordan's geography is a bit of a paradox. It is somehow both its greatest weakness and its saving grace at the same time. With a fertile highland area of about 1,700 meters in the west and a desert plateau averaging around 900 meters in the east, Jordan boasts a diverse terrain, an impressive feat for a country roughly the size of the US state of Indiana. Unfortunately, its diversity doesn't include an ample amount of water. Instead, it's one of the driest countries in the world, receiving an average rainfall of just 245 millimeters annually. In fact, only 20% of the country's land gets more than 200 millimeters of rain a year. And of that 20% of land, only 7% is used as farmland. The country's access to arable land has shrunk even further through the decades due to the need to develop urban areas. Today, Jordan has dedicated farms, but those aren't enough to supply its people with enough food, much less keep pace with the economy. As a result, it has to import a steady supply of food from its allies, primarily the United States, just to keep its population fed. Additionally, despite being in a region that is famous for its mass extraction and abundance of oil and other fossil fuels, Jordan doesn't really have much. Unlike its neighbors Iraq, Syria, and Saudi Arabia, Jordan has just one natural gas field where it extracts about 1 million cubic meters of gas per day. This is enough to supply just a single power plant in the country. The rest of Jordan's oil and gas has to be imported from other countries. While Jordan's lack of agriculture and oil production has left it disadvantaged compared to its neighbors, the country isn't completely helpless. Thanks to its rich history, it has become a prime spot for tourists wanting to explore portions of the Middle East without worrying about being caught in a war. As such, tourism has become the economic lifeblood of the country, drawing millions of people from all over the world, but particularly the United States, Europe, and China. But while Jordan is stable, its neighbors are not. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, and Israel surround Jordan and are constantly at odds with one another or suffering from internal strife. In fact, war has sparked between these four countries more often than almost any other country in the modern era. But Jordan's physical geography insulates it in unique ways. Along its eastern and southern borders, it's flanked by the Syrian and Arabian deserts, two deserts which are very challenging to traverse. Meanwhile, its northern and western borders are lined by the Dead Sea, which sits about 430 meters below sea level and is 9 times saltier than any ocean, and the Jordanian highlands, home to Jabal ad-Dami, Jordan's largest peak, and the Jordan River. With so many unstable neighbors, a climate that doesn't make for the greatest farmlands, and an overall lack of resources, it's shocking that Jordan has done as well as it has. And that's without considering all of the wars, takeovers, and conquests it's been throughout history. 2 bananas. That's what my breakfast has been for the last few years. Mostly because when I get up, I immediately begin working, leaving no time to myself to prepare an actual nutritionally healthy breakfast. That is until I found Huel. Huel has become my daily routine, not only because it's convenient, but because it's helped me tackle the most important meal of the day without sacrificing the thing I value most, my time. But time isn't the only thing I'm getting. In every bottle, there's 35 grams of protein and 27 essential vitamins and minerals that make this single bottle 100% nutritionally complete. That means less feeling hungry and snacky throughout the day, and more feeling great and energized. Even if I had the time, I'm not sure I could make a breakfast as good as my morning Huel. So if you're looking to get back some time while still being nutritionally complete, come join me. Right now, you can get 15% off Huel today with code GEOFF at Huel.com/Geoff. Fuel your best performance with Huel today. While Jordan is a beautiful and relatively stable country today, it hasn't been an actual country for all that long. There has, of course, been some form of Jordan weaved throughout history, but it's not been consistent. The country has been ruthlessly controlled and subjugated by countless different invaders throughout history. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through an exhaustive history of Jordan, so here's a really quick 60-second version that will bring us up to the year 1900. Sometime around 3,000 years ago, the area we know today as Jordan was home to 3 related but independent kingdoms known as Ammon, Moab, and Edom. But these kingdoms would quickly fall to the rising Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire would fall shortly after, leaving the 3 kingdoms independent once again, but for only a few decades because then the Babylonians would take over the area. Babylon would get snuffed out, and, in their place, the Persians and then the Greeks would take over. The Greeks would be followed by the Romans, who would completely alter the culture of the region, leaving little remnant of the old kingdoms. The Persian Empire would also rise again during this time and constantly battle against Rome for the region until both would eventually fall apart. In their stead, a series of Islamic caliphates would rise and gain control of the region. It was during this period that the Jordan we know today would fall into ruin and remain a relative backwater until crusaders from Europe arrived to the region and constructed a series of castles and fortifications. But the crusaders were largely European, and of course, they would eventually go back to Europe, leaving an Egyptian sultanate known as the Mamluks to take over. The Mamluks are perhaps best known for their ability to fend off the Mongolian Empire during a time when most could not. Finally, after a few hundred years under the Mamluks, Jordan would be conquered by the Ottoman Empire, where it would remain until the 20th century. And that brings us up to the modern era. Whew! It's during this time that the Jordan of today really starts to emerge, but unfortunately, being part of the Ottoman Empire was not great for Jordanians. You see, the Ottoman Empire was not interested in governing the region fairly. It wanted the income from taxes, but it didn't provide any aid or improvement in exchange. Because of this, Jordanians would stage a few revolts: the Shubak Revolt in 1900 and 1905, and the Karak Revolt in 1910. While the Ottoman Empire dealt with these revolts quickly and harshly, it never fully quelled Jordanian anger at its mismanagement. As such, during World War I, Jordanians would side with the British and actively fight against the Turks. After the war, Jordan would become part of the British Empire, who would hold on to it for a couple more decades until, in 1946, the country of Jordan would officially become independent. Jordan was renamed to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and Abdullah bin Hussein, the former head of the current royal family, was officially crowned king. But the newly independent Jordan would fall into the same destabilizing issues that would plague its Arab neighbors. It would constantly battle against Israel and, oftentimes, lose those same battles. Because of this, it would take in an enormous amount of refugees from Palestine, one of whom would assassinate the first king of Jordan. And during this time, the country would largely reject the global economy and geopolitical order. All of this occurred between 1946 and 1999. So this then begs the question: if Jordan had such a tumultuous history, how has it managed to stabilize itself in just a couple decades? Jordan's current stability really stems from 2 core reasons. Internally, the country's monarchy has managed to maintain control through a combination of shrewd maneuvers and adopting more progressive policies. And externally, it's become dependable as neutral ground, with which many countries that are often at odds with one another can negotiate peacefully. Both have been integral to creating the country we know today. But let's start with the internal reasons for its stability. After nearly 80 years of monarchy, Jordan has never really been in danger of a full-scale revolution, unlike its neighbors in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran. While a military coup was staged in 1957 by Arab nationalist groups within its military, it was foiled before anything serious could occur. This can't be overstated enough. Stability in leadership creates the underlying foundation for a stable country. Jordan has now been led by the same royal family since its founding. Only Saudi Arabia has a longer tenured monarchy. But also, the Jordanian royal family has modernized the country and made progressive movements to stay well ahead of any potential issues. For example, Queen Rania has been directly involved in the country's social development programs. Her work has improved children's education, empowered women's rights, and pushed for better healthcare. The royal family's push to keep Jordanians happy and healthy has led to some remarkable outcomes, including the fact that 99% of Jordanians have access to clean water despite the country's lack of rainfall. But it might be King Abdullah II who has prioritized his people's safety over all else. Since becoming king in 1999, he has made a point of allying Jordan with countries like the United Kingdom, France, the United States, and even Saudi Arabia to maintain that safety. Jordan's allies not only provide a deterrent from war, but also provide support in areas where the country can't fend for itself. And it's these exact allies that really keep the country stable today. And they managed to make all of these allies in two incredible ways. First, Jordan has accepted far more international refugees than most countries ever would. And given the large number and diversity of refugees living in Jordan, you would think that this would lead to conflict. But the reality is refugees live freely without suffering governmental violence or systemic prejudice. In fact, Jordan has become so good at hosting refugees that it now hosts what is believed to be 3 million Palestinians, 1.4 million Syrians, and thousands more Circassians, Chechens, Armenians, and Christians. Because of this, Jordan managed to win over the hearts of its fellow Arab neighbors, countries who now value the peace that Jordan is able to offer the region. Making peace and gaining respect from its nearest neighbors was crucial for Jordan because it would then do something that, for most other countries, would lead to regional isolation, if not outright conflict. Jordan made peace with Israel, which opened the door for peaceful relations with the West. For most countries, recognizing the state of Israel is a surefire way to incur the wrath of most of the Middle East, but not Jordan. So how did they manage to avoid a major conflict when previously the mere idea of making peace with Israel got their former king assassinated? Well, it's the neutrality of it all. Most Middle Eastern countries despise Israel due to an extensive history of damaging and embarrassing wars. While the governments of these countries would have no issue declaring Jordan an enemy, they also recognize its value as a neutral state. For most, there is nowhere else for their refugees to go. And if they were to declare war on Jordan, they would also be declaring war on refugees who are their allies. And because of this, Jordan has remained peaceful for over 50 years. And this lack of war has led to an increase in tourism and an improved economy. Jordanians themselves seem to have no issue with their alliance with Israel because it ensures economic support from foreign countries, which in turn improves their way of life. Jordan, of course, wasn't immune from the Arab Spring revolts of 2011 and 2012, but again, the royal family reacted quickly. And instead of violently crushing the revolts, the king responded by reforming about a third of the country's constitution, establishing an independent election commission, and vowing to embark on a democratic trajectory. Now, all this said, all of this stability has been put in jeopardy recently by the actions of Iran. In March 2024, Jordanian security forces foiled a suspected Iranian-backed plot to smuggle mines, explosives, rifles, and rockets into Jordan from Syria. These weapons were likely destined for use by anti-monarchy militias in Jordan itself. Over the past year, many other attempts to smuggle weapons across the Syria-Jordan border have been stopped, but others have made it through, and that could prove to be a problem for Jordan in the future. In response, King Abdullah II seems to have moved closer to the United States, including shooting down drones and rockets fired by Iran at Israel. This position is increasingly at odds with many of his subjects, including the millions of Palestinian refugees who continue to live in the country today. If tensions in Jordan rise, many people inside and outside the country may try to take advantage of any instability that comes. At that point, the one thing that has kept this country stable for so long, its neutrality, may well come into danger. Jordan's stability is owed to help from its international allies and its willingness to provide refuge even when dealing with its own struggles. While many of its neighbors will wish to see it continue as a valuable neutral territory, others, notably Iran, would be more than happy to undermine that stability. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, you probably like maps, which means you should check out my map store. Every map you buy helps support this channel. I hope you enjoyed learning all about Jordan. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to watch more videos, you can. Thanks for watching. See you next week.